It's time for one of my favorite podcasts of the year. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, July 13th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we are redrafting the first two rounds for the rest of the season. Love to do it. Fun exercise. And I'm very much so looking forward to it. The A's also promoted two of their top prospects, Tyler Soderstom and Zack Gelof. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Shout out to the Welsh. We did the top impact prospects for the second half of the season. We talked about like 12, 15 names the other day, and he brought up both of those guys. So shout out to the Welsh for getting ahead of that. Before we get started, please like this video and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. I've got to let everyone behind the curtain a little bit here before we get started. We're talking beforehand, as we usually do, right? I'm stalling because I need some more time. And I asked the guys, well, what do you think about my new Yankee hat? Scott hated it. He's like, it looks like a second grader put your hat together with all the clip art and I was like, I don't know, man.
I mean, this is not a unique take of mine. When this line of hats was introduced and it was making its way through that was like the consensus point of view. It looked like, so it's a regular Yankees hat, but it has just like an image of the Statue of Liberty on it. And I don't know. It has a few other New York related images.
See, so I hate this hat for a different reason.
Well, we know why, Chris.
Because it's a Yankees hat. Yeah, exactly.
You're a hater.
Yeah.
Well, I said, and it's not just your hat specifically. It's a whole line of hats that was released that are, they have images like that related to the city around, just plastered onto the normal team's hat. And I said it looked exactly how it would look if you assigned a second grader with the task of, make an alternate Yankees hat that, has that shows a connection to the city. What they do is they'd go and find clip art images of like the Statue of Liberty and just stick it on the Yankees hat. And that's exactly what has been done with this line of hats. And I'm surprised you went for it, Frank. I'm a little surprised you went for it.
More than the Statue of Liberty, I really like the hats with like the World Series patches, and on the back it has 2 World Series patches on it and stuff, but well, I know what I'm not getting Scott for Christmas, basically. So there you go.
I wish
the Braves hat has like a peach on it or something.
I wish the Welsh was on here because there's an I think you should leave skit that I really want to quote this skit so bad, but I can't. You guys don't know about Dan Flash's.
You probably can do it, and I'm sure
a lot very aggressive patterns.
A lot of people out there would probably know what you're talking about.
You pay so much money for the aggressive patterns.
Well, anyway, let us know what you think of my hat. Do you agree with me, or do you agree with Scott? Let's get into redrafting the first 2 rounds for the rest of the season. This is for 5x5 Roto, but we can make some points along the way about players who might be higher in head-to-head points leagues, maybe a little bit lower. So, of course, we will do that. And Chris, you have been gifted the first overall pick. I wonder where you're going to go.
I mean, I think it's the number 1 pick in either format. It's Ronald Acuna. He's just having an absolutely absurd season. And we talk about it a lot. We probably don't need to talk about it on this podcast because there's nothing actionable about Ronald Acuna at all right now. But he's the clear number 1 player in fantasy. He's not the best player in baseball because Shohei Ohtani exists, but he's doing a real good job of giving Shohei Ohtani a run for his money. I mean, it's about as good a run as Shohei Ohtani could get. And look, I don't think Ronald Acuna is going to keep hitting 330. I think he'll probably slow down. I don't think he's going to score 147 runs. Probably won't drive in 95 runs or whatever he's on pace for. I think there will probably be some slowdown. On the other hand, he is actually, based on expected stats, one of the biggest underperformers in baseball right now, which is just bananas.
His expected batting average is 350. And that's a stat, expected batting average, that's supposed to moderate the extremes. You're not supposed to see an expected batting average that high ever. And part of the reason for that is he's cut his strikeout rate in half.
Yeah.
Like he's made improvements with strikeout rate in the past, but this strikeout rate is almost exactly half of his career best strikeout rate. He's striking out 12% of the time, in addition to all the impact he's having with power and on the base paths. And I don't know, maybe he'll hit 330. I'm not.
Yeah, like I said that more confident than I actually am, because look, I mean, this is the kind of thing we talked about coming into the season, where like Ronald Acuna may not make the Hall of Fame. He's got a long way to go. But the start that he's on his career is 100% a Hall of Fame start. Like, if you look up any comparable players, basically all of them are going to be in the Hall of Fame, except for, like, I think Tony Caligliero always shows up for these guys. Like, if you compare them, he had a great start to his career and then got derailed. I think that's who I'm thinking of. But everyone else, it's like he was always a very, very good bat to bounce back. We're talking about an elite player, an elite young player especially. He's amazing. He walks a lot now. He's just incredible.
Last point on Ronald Acuna, 441.5 fantasy points on CBS. The next closest hitter is Shohei Ohtani at 383.5. So
that's a good season.
Nearly 60 points less than what Ronald Acuna is doing right now.
441 points is like, if you do that for a whole season, that's like a top 100 player in fantasy scoring. It's wild what he's doing.
With 21 homers and 41 steals already, I think if Ronald Acuna goes on to have a 30-60 season from where he is now, it'll be a disappointment given where he is now. Like, that'll mean, oh wow, he slowed way down, and he finished with a 30 homers, 60 steal season. So that's amazing.
I always love a good Chris grabbing the cat in the middle of the screen and throwing it on the floor. Because you're going to hear it. We haven't heard it in a couple of weeks because we changed the feeding time, but the feeder's going to go off in about a minute, and she knows it. And she's being annoying anyway. It's manipulative. She's trying to get fed. And just wait, the thing is going to go off. She's staring at it now. It's fine. I love it. All right, so first overall was Ronald Acuna. We probably talked about him for way too long. Scott, you're up with the second pick.
Never can talk about Acuna for too long. I am going to go with who I think is the one player with the chance of supplanting Acuna rest of season. I don't think he will, but he's the one player with a chance of doing it, and that is Fernando Tatis, who was a little slow out of the gate coming back from all the surgeries and the suspension. There's the cat feeder.
Let's go.
Tatis was a little slow out of the gate, but then he really turned it on in June. And since the start of June, 7 homers, 9 steals, batting well over 300, looking basically like the Fernando Tatis we saw before all the surgeries and the suspension. And for having missed that first month of the year, he's already at 16 homers, 14 steals. Is outfield and shortstop eligible, which comes in handy. Probably starting him in the outfield at this point, to be honest. But it's nice to have that extra eligibility. And yeah, I think he's, for me, the clear number 2 choice.
Fernando Tatis is currently the 19th overall player in Roto, despite playing 20 less games than everybody else. 3.9 fantasy points per game. That's tied for 8th best among all hitters. Like Acuna has cut his strikeout rate so far this season. The only thing I think he needs to do, and hopefully, could pull this off in the second half, is lift the ball a little bit more. His barrel rate is down a little bit so far this season compared to his career mark. But if he does that, I think he can get back on that normal Fernando Tatis pace.
I mean, that's the thing, is that he's on a 162 game pace of 288 batting average, 120 runs, 37 homers, 102 RBI, and 34 steals. And he really hasn't been that good. Like, he's playing below the level that he's previously established in the majors. I was all in on him. He was a top 12 player for me, even with the suspension. I'm really happy with what he's done. And yeah, I think he's going to be even better in the second half.
All right, number 3 pick goes to me, and I will take Shohei Ohtani. I think there's a pretty clear top 3. Maybe you can argue Tatis versus Shohei Ohtani. I think the draft probably starts here with the 4th pick. We talked about Ohtani yesterday and what he's done. Leads baseball with 32 home runs this season while batting .302, 63 runs, 71 RBI, 11 steals. He also has the 4th most strikeouts in baseball as a pitcher, 132 strikeouts so far this season. A quick question to you guys. Do you think Ohtani gets traded? No?
The Angels are too competitive to even consider trading him.
Yeah, I don't think it happens either. I do want to say, it's obvious to all of us, but it probably needs to be said. If we're drafting for a league with daily lineups, Ohtani is easily the number 1 pick. They had the number 1 overall pick. The only problem with him being so good as a pitcher and a hitter is it just makes it all the more frustrating that you can't get both of those contributions from him in the same scoring period. But if you're setting your lineup every day, then you pretty much can. You miss the hitting stats he delivers on days he's pitching, but otherwise you pretty much get it all. And that is nobody comes close to making the impact he can in that scenario. I will say, like, you can make the case to take him ahead of Tatis, probably. But I do think there's a danger in drafting a player right when he's at his very hottest, because he hit 15 home runs in June. He basically had half of his season total in June. Heading into June, Shohei Ohtani, his numbers were good, but they were more typical of a Shohei Ohtani season. They weren't like the amazing stat line he has now. So he entered June batting .269 with 15 homers, 7 steals, and .882 OPS. Still numbers that would justify a first-round pick, especially given the possibility of being able to use him as a pitcher when needed. But I think his numbers are a little overblown right now because he just had such a ridiculous month. So we'll see if that holds true. But I don't know if, looking back, we're going to see him as an obvious top 5 pick in weekly lineup leagues.
Chris, you are up with the 4th pick in the draft. The first 3, Acuna, Tatis, and Ohtani.
And I think this is where it gets really, really difficult. I'm going to default to Jose Ramirez, there are probably sexier picks that I could make. And there's one in particular who has kind of been an even better version of Jose Ramirez so far. Well, I guess there's 2 that I could think of, but Ramirez, the track record, the really, really high floor. And I think, like, we haven't necessarily seen a crazy month from him yet. I guess his June was very, very good, 7 home runs, but we haven't seen him go 10 home runs in a month with, a bunch of steals. He had 7 and 4 in June. He was really, really good, but I think he's probably underperformed a little. And you're still talking about a guy who's on a 25 homer, 15 steal pace, and will probably improve on both of those numbers.
Jose Ramirez, currently the 23rd overall player in Roto, the 9th best hitter in head-to-head points leagues. And you were right. First 2 months, kind of slow start for Jose Ramirez, then exploded in June. I guess explosion, a relative term compared to someone like Shohei Ohtani, but 330 with 7 home runs, 4 steals, a 1030 OPS. That is a very, very fine month for Ramirez. Frankly, a little surprised that you went with him, Chris. I think there are other high flourish type options.
So you left me with an easy one here.
It depends on, like, if we were talking about projecting 2024, there's one guy in particular who I would consider taking over Jose Ramirez. And then you're talking about Freddie Freeman, right? Scott,
Yes.
That's who you're going to take?
Yes.
That's the one I'm really struggling with because
he has more stolen bases than Jose Ramirez.
That's the thing that's wild is, like, he's slow. Freddie Freeman is slow of foot now. He is 32nd percentile in sprint speed, but he's been a very good base runner over the past few seasons, had a career high in stolen bases last year as a 32-year-old. And now, even though he's slower, he's on pace for 25 steals. I just don't know how real that is. Oh, he's one away.
Consecutive years of doing it, and he's both since, like, it coincides with him joining the Dodgers,
mm-hmm.
and this year where he's on pace to double the career high he set last year, basically, it coincides with a significant rule change that improves base stealing. So he's shown himself to be somebody who, A, is running more with the Dodgers, B, is happy to take advantage of this rule change. And I don't have reason to think it's going to change. And that Freddie Freeman, I don't know if he's going to get all the way to 25. But if you're setting the over under at 19, I think I'd take the over. He's already got 12. And the thing is, you could justify picking him here even without the speed element. That's just a nice bonus. He's the safest bet for batting average in baseball. He's on pace for 131 runs scored, batting second in the Dodgers lineup. And after slumping to 21 homers last year, he's on pace for 30 this year. So any whiff of decline as a power hitter, I think, has been removed. And he's been as safe of a first round hitter as you can think of. I mean, I think he's overtaken Mike Trout. I mean, we don't think of Mike Trout as a first rounder anymore, and Freddie Freeman is still sticking around there. So he's been as reliable of a first round pick as anybody over the past decade.
Yeah. And
as somehow getting even better because he's added this element of speed.
Yeah, not counting 2020, he's on pace for the second best batting average of his career after last season, the second most home runs of his career. Sorry, the third most home runs of his career, the most steals, the most RBI, and the second most runs. And he's 33 years old. It's remarkable.
I'll add another note to this. Because, specifically since we're talking about a roto draft here, I think there's a tendency to think of Freddie Freeman as more of a points league specialist, since for most of his career, he wasn't a stolen base standout and he's always had good plate discipline and all that. He is currently the number 3 overall player in roto leagues. And here I am taking him 5th in our draft here. Last year, he was also the number 3 player in roto leagues, even with the diminished power and even with him not stealing near as many bases as he is this year. So I think he's an obvious top 5 choice now in fantasy. And it only helps that first base has a pretty big drop off after the top 5, 6, 7 at the position. So it's become a nice position to fill early too.
And I'll say this, even if Freddie Freeman keeps us up for the rest of the season, I don't think that he'll be a top 5 pick next year either, just because he's going to be 33 or 34. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like people will want to push up the young, exciting guys. Corbin Carroll, Elly De La Cruz, a first round pick next year.
Yeah.
If he keeps this up, I can promise you I will have Freddie Freeman in my top 5 for next year.
Here's the thing.
Do it.
We're not picking Aaron Judge here because it's rest of this season.
Correct.
He probably goes ahead of Freddie Freeman.
Yeah.
That would still leave Freeman in my 5 because I want to have Jose Ramirez in my 5. So I feel confident saying I can get Freeman in the top 5.
All right. Number 6 pick for me is I'm going to go with another high floor player, someone who has exploded over the past couple of weeks. That is Mookie Betts. He's currently the 5th best player in Roto, the 3rd best hitter in head-to-head points leagues, batting .276 with 26 home runs, 7 steals. Like Freddie Freeman, the counting stats are insane right now. On pace for 131 runs scored, 112 RBI, and there might actually be room for the batting average to climb. He's got a .285 xBA, the highest barrel rate since 2018. So Mookie Betts has been awesome. Doesn't run as much as he used to, or maybe as much as we want him to, but the home runs, the counting stats certainly make up for that. Whether it's roto or head-to-head points, I am going with Mookie Betts 6th overall. Just to recap the first half of the first round: Acuna, Tatis, Shohei Ohtani, Jose Ramirez, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, and Chris, I don't know if you have a cat to collect or anything, but if you're ready to go, you have the 7th pick.
These cats are acting a fool. Yeah, I think Corbin Carroll's the pick here. I would have taken him 4th, actually. Or I guess, no, sorry. I would have taken him 5th. I had the chance. I would have taken him 5th after Jose Ramirez. So I would have taken him ahead of Freddie Freeman. And, partially that's just what Frank was talking about there, the the bias against the 34-year-old is a little unfair. And, Carroll, I think 2 weeks ago, Scott, when you wrote your redrafting the first 2 rounds, Corbin Carroll was
third,
your number 3 pick.
Yeah, I had him at Ohtani even.
And I think the shoulder scares have dampened the enthusiasm just a little bit. I think it's not that we think he's going to be bad the rest of the way. It's just it's introducing an element of risk that
I would say so
feels pretty significant. Although what they've said is that it really wasn't worrisome at all. That it was just scary at the moment. He had the way he flexed, it was just like a nerve thing, is what they said.
They've had to say that twice in the span of a week. So now every time Corbin Carroll swings, I'm expecting something bad to happen.
Of course, he came back and went 2 for 5.
And he might be too, because in both instances, I mean, he just walked off the field. He was, we were thinking season-ending injury on this previously surgically repaired shoulder that, he does not seem confident in it himself. And I know they've had MRIs to rule out. I wish they'd give us more detail. Like they've said it's not an issue, but they haven't really gone into more detail than that. And, if they were using terms like scar tissue or something, maybe I'd feel better about it, but they haven't actually said that, I don't think. So and we've talked about, is now the time to sell on Carroll? Well, I've said, I think you still need to get a first round return for him.
Everybody else knows.
Right. Everybody else knows. So I don't think you could necessarily get a first round return for him, but this is why we're saying you still need a first round return for him, because I would have taken him with the next pick if you hadn't taken him here at 7th overall.
Yeah. I will say there are non-injury reasons to bump him down just a little bit relative to Jose Ramirez, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman, who are just so proven. I mean, those 2 guys are 2 of the best hitters, or 3 of the best hitters of the last decade. I think Jose Ramirez is the only one whose track record isn't quite a decade long of being an elite fantasy option, but he's been outstanding for a long time. Carroll obviously doesn't have the track record of those guys, and the underlying numbers just aren't quite as good for him. He has a 389 WOBA, 346 xWOBA. Because he's so athletic and because he's so young, I think that, one, you expect him to outperform the expected stats and to get better. But on a pure, as a hitter, he's closer probably to I'm trying to find the right comp that won't make people mad. More like Bo Bichette than, Freddie Freeman.
I think that's fair, but the combination of the power and the speed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why he's going as high as he is. And frankly, if I wasn't worried about the shoulder at all, I think he probably should be the 4th overall pick. He should probably go after the top 3. And I have this written down in the notes too. I'm not really worried about the expected stats because he was arguably the top prospect coming into this season. And I don't want to bet against that. So I'm willing to be wrong about it, but
a huge standout at every level.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's more just when you're comparing him to Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Jose Ramirez, guys who have been top tier hitters, not just fantasy players, but like elite hitters at the major league level for such a long time. I think it's mostly just, you have to split hairs somewhere.
I'm already hedging on guaranteeing Freeman will be in my top 5 next year. I guess I'm really counting on Ohtani not being in my top 5 because I think Acuna, Tatis, Judge, and Carroll will have to be. And who am I forgetting?
Acuna, Tatis,
Betts,
Judge,
Ramirez, Judge.
Oh, there's room
Elly De La Cruz.
There's room for all of them, isn't it? Even with Ohtani, there's room for Ohtani and Freeman. Never mind. We'll keep going. Pick number 8.
Scott, you have the 8th pick, but first we're going to take a break. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think about it. We'll do that right after this.
When you're the FedEx Cup champion, your name's on this trophy forever.
This is our season-long race. This is the sought-after trophy when we tee it up, the first event of the season that you think about.
3 tournaments with the world's best golfers battling for the tour's toughest trophy to win, the FedEx Cup. The playoffs begin August 12th on CBS.
Welcome back, and a quick reminder to sign up for our Fantasy Baseball Today newsletter. It's free. You can find it at cbssports.com/newsletters. And I know, Chris, you've been doing a good job sending it out this week. Sleepers, breakouts, and busts for the second half. So again, you can get all that delivered right to your inbox every single day. cbssports.com/newsletters. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, scan the QR code in the top right corner. That will bring you right to the website where you can sign up for free. Scott, you were up with the 8th overall pick.
I'm going to go against what I did in the article a couple weeks ago. I was trying to be more of a measured analysis in that the article, which is a bit more, it's of a bit more permanence, I feel like, than a podcast, which people are just going to listen to once and never listen to again. So I'm going to go crazy here. I'm going to take the guy who I've loved for so long, who I've always thought had a first round outcome, and is finally delivering on that. I'm going with Corey Seager. Corey Seager with pick 8, not wanting to miss out on him because he has been everything he was destined to be here. Finally combining those elite line drive skills, the consistency of the 300 batting average, basically turned into that Freddie Freeman caliber hitter that we've long compared him to.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's only taken place over like 2/3 of the schedule that everyone else has played. So that, it's a smaller sample size we're working with here, but he's batting over 350. His expected batting average is 334. So it's about as ridiculous as Acuna's is. And Seager has the advantage that so many Rangers hitters seem to be enjoying, where that lineup is it's so prolific that everybody's RBI and run totals are they're just enormous up and down the lineup. It's crazy how much runs and RBI are elevating every Rangers hitter, in addition to having the ridiculous batting average and being the best power source at shortstop other than Tatis and Betts. Seager, that's just elevating him all the more. He actually has more fantasy points per game than Freeman so far this year. So, yeah, I think Seager in round 1 makes sense.
All right. Well, for me, there's not really a clear-cut hitter that I'm excited to take here. So I'm just going to go ahead and break the ice and take the first starting pitcher, who is Spencer Strider. He's my number 1 pitcher ranked for the rest of the season. He's the top pitcher in Roto, excluding Ohtani because they count his hitting stats as well. 3.44 ERA, a 109 whip, 166 strikeouts for Spencer Strider, by far the most in baseball. He's first in K- walk rate, first in Sierra by a mile. By every metric that we look at, Spencer Strider has been the best pitcher in baseball this season. Some inconsistencies in the first half, velocity fluctuating a little bit here and there. Had some games where he gave up some home runs, but I think he's the best pitcher in baseball right now. I'm going to go ahead and take Spencer Strider 9th overall. And Chris, you are up with the Scott.
If I could comment on Strider, I think it would be a lot easier for me to say he's the best pitcher in fantasy rest of way if he threw 200 innings last year. He threw 130 innings last year. And so, he's already over 100 now. I don't think they're going to shut him down at any point, but a lot of times when pitchers are entering unfamiliar territory with the innings, we see them kind of lose something.
Shane McClanahan last year towards the end.
Exactly. And he wouldn't be the first. Obviously Strider relies so much on just getting maximum velocity that, I wonder how September is going to go. So I definitely see the justification for making him the first pitcher taken. I probably would not be the one to take it, but somebody has to. So thanks for taking that one for the team, Frank.
I think that the best way to phrase it is it's not that Spencer Strider is suddenly going to be bad in September. It's just an unknown. It's an unknown variable. And that works both ways, right? Because we're at the point, I think, after that first 6 or 7, maybe. Yeah, I think after the first 7, it opens up. And next year, if everybody continues apace, I think it'll be 8. I think Aaron Judge will be there, and it'll just be that 8. That'll be really easy. And then after that, I think it opens up, and that's why we have Corey Seager, and that's why we have Spencer Strider. And so it's just to say that there are a lot of sure things here. And Spencer Strider, as good as he is just a little bit less of a sure thing than certainly the guys who went ahead of him. However, if he gets to the end of the season and he's thrown 190 innings and ends up with 300 strikeouts, I mean, if that's the pace that he's on, with even if it's a 3.44 ERA in this environment, in this economy, like we talked about yesterday, if he does that, he's probably a first round pick, and he might make that group of 8 a group of 9. So it's just it is right now an unknown.
Yeah. It's also kind of just by default for me right now, Chris. We were talking beforehand, as good as Gerrit Cole was in the first half, you look at the underlying numbers for him, the strikeout rate is way down this year. Swinging strike rate is way down, and his FIP, XFIP, xERA, they're all in the high 3s. So I do wonder if maybe we see some regression from Gerrit Cole in the second half. It's just, I don't really see anyone that's going to dethrone Spencer Strider unless something crazy happens, like maybe he falls off. But
Strider is slightly worse than he was last year. It's worth pointing out. Like, he went from the strikeout rate and the walk rate have remained identical. They're still very, very good. But he went from, can you guys hear my cats acting a ruckus in the back?
Not really.
Spencer Strider went from one of the best in expected WOBA on contact to pretty bad so far. And you've seen it, right? There have been a few blow up starts. There have been some issues with home runs. He's given up 13 home runs. He gave up 7 last season in 27 more innings. So all the stuff we talked about yesterday, it's afflicting every pitcher. You know, even Gerrit Cole, like you said, has been a little bit worse, but also Shane McClanahan, even before the injury, there were a few warts there. Corbin Burns has obviously not been as good. So that's why if Spencer Strider can keep this up, even with the home run issues, I think he probably elevates himself from the rest of the position.
His ERA was over 4 as recently as June 14th.
Yeah.
Or June 19th, I guess. So, you know, it's down to 3.44 now. He started integrating a changeup, which I think has helped round out his arsenal. And I'm not saying I'm not so worried about performance from Strider. I'm just worried about the unfamiliar territory.
And it's not even worry. I think worry is the wrong word. It's just, we don't know.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, let's keep it moving here. Chris, you're back up with the 10th overall pick.
And this is where I think it gets really, really tough. I think I want to just say Aaron Judge. So I'm just going to do it, even though we don't know when he's going to be back and we don't know what it's going to look like when he's back and all of those things. But he was arguably, certainly almost as good as he was last season. He was having a season that very much backed up the season he put together last season. He probably wasn't going to hit 62 home runs, although that was actually the pace he was on. But I think just as a hitter, Aaron Judge is clearly the best right now. I mean, Freddie Freeman is a little more well-rounded, but like Aaron Judge is now going on a 2-season stretch, if we call this a season, where he's basically been an 1,100 OPS hitter. We haven't seen that since Albert Pujols at his best. I don't think Mike Trout even ever did that. So it's pretty wild what he's doing. Obviously, there are huge question marks, but if Aaron Judge had no health concerns, is he the number 2 pick?
I think so. Either him or 3. Yeah, he's in that mix. I think the top 3 becomes a top 4. I think it becomes, in some order, Ronald Acuna, Tatis, Shohei Ohtani, and Aaron Judge. I think that's a top 4 if he's healthy. The latest update that we have came out on July 4th, and apparently he did some hitting off of a tee and taking soft toss, and he had this quote, doesn't feel great. Surgery after the season is a possibility. That was per Pete Caldera of the Bergen Record. So we'll see what happens with Aaron Judge. Still kind of up in the air with that toe injury, but when he played, he was amazing. Scott, you were up 11th overall.
I wasn't originally going to make this pick. I'm reacting to Chris's pick. If Chris is already taking Aaron Judge, then I should probably take the the other player who would be an obvious first rounder if he wasn't injured, but he actually has a clear timetable as first return, unlike Judge, and that is Jordan Alvarez, who is set to begin a rehab assignment as he works his way back from a strained oblique. So I think we'll see him before the end of July. And I mean, he was doing Jordan Alvarez things before he got hurt. He's averaging 3.96 points per game, which is actually more than Corbin Carroll, for instance. Obviously, that's a points league measurement, and Alvarez doesn't provide the speed Carroll does, but the point is he's super insanely productive. And yeah, should be back soon. So Jordan Alvarez is the pick.
Jordan Alvarez in 57 games this year, hit 277 with 17 home runs and 55 RBI. Nearly an RBI per game.
That's wild.
Crazy stuff there for Jordan Alvarez before getting hurt. Hopefully we see him very soon here in the second half. I am up to round out the first round, 12th overall pick, and I think I'm going to make it back-to-back Astros, and I'm going to go ahead and take Kyle Tucker, who is currently the 18th overall player in Roto. He's the 15th best hitter in head-to-head points. He's batting .288 with 13 home runs and 15 steals. The pace is a little bit lower than you'd like. 23 homer, 26 steal pace. He had a rough May that kind of derailed the numbers. But since the start of June for Kyle Tucker, he's batting .318 with 6 home runs and 8 steals. Nearly as many walks as strikeouts. Good average exit velocity. Obviously, that plate discipline helps him a ton in points leagues as well. So back-to-back Astros there to finish out the first round. And I'll just recap that. The first 6 picks: Acuna, Tatis, Ohtani, Jose Ramirez, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts. And then the back half of the first round: Corbin Carroll, Corey Seager, Spencer Strider, Aaron Judge, Jordan Alvarez, and Kyle Tucker. We're going to take a little break from the draft. Want to quickly talk about the A's promoting 2 of their top prospects, and that is coming on Friday. Tyler Soderstrom, 16% rostered on CBS. He's actually first base eligibility. He's played more games at catcher in the minors this year, but last year he actually played more games at first base, and I think that's where he projects to play moving forward. Obviously, they have Shea Langoliers as well, so I think we'll see some first base, DH, maybe backup catcher here or there for Tyler Soderstrom, former first-round pick back in 2020. 69 games at AAA. He was hitting .254 with 20 home runs and really good StatCast numbers. He is hitting the ball really hard down there. Scott, your interest level on Tyler Soderstrom?
It's pretty modest. I'm going to be honest. I was very excited when he was drafted. I became less enthusiastic about him basically with every move up the ladder. And in the upper minors, he was supposed to be a patient hitter who drew a lot of walks, and it couldn't have been further from what actually happened once he got to the upper minors. The strikeout to walk ratio was pretty bad. He does hit the ball hard enough that maybe he's able to overcome that at the major league level, but for a bad team, kind of hurried to the majors as a 21-year-old. And the fact he's first base only on CBS, it makes it harder to give him the benefit of the doubt, I'd say. Now, if you play somewhere else where he's catcher eligible, that changes things quite a bit, because obviously it doesn't take much for a player with catcher eligibility to be a deserving starter in fantasy, particularly when he's getting a lot of at-bats at some other position. So if that's the case, if you can use Soderstrom at catcher, then you probably just take a flyer on the power and hope it works out. But if it's not like that, if you can only use him at first base, maybe pick him up in leagues where you have a corner infield spot to fill. But otherwise, I'd take a wait and see approach with him. By the way, I wouldn't rule out him potentially picking up catcher eligibility along the way. I don't think he's going to unseat Shea Langoliers as like the primary catcher, but could he make 5 appearances there at some point over the next few weeks? Could that happen? That could happen. So we'll keep an eye on that. But as of now, on CBS, Soderstrom, first base only.
SodaStream?
In leagues where he does have catcher eligibility, Scott, would you take Soderstrom or Henry Davis?
Henry Davis.
What about versus Alvarez? Francisco
Alvarez. He's behind them. I might dump Melendez for Soderstrom.
Okay.
In a one catcher league, just because trying to get something going behind the plate. It's not there with Melendez.
Yep. That's fair. Just trying to figure out where he would kind of slot into the catcher rankings if Tyler Soderstrom has catcher eligibility on CBS. He doesn't. He does actually have it on Yahoo, so keep that in mind if you do play over there. Zack Gelof is the other prospect getting called up for the Oakland A's. He's only 3% rostered, second base eligible, a former second-round pick in 2021. He's a little bit older, 23 years old. He was batting .304 with 12 home runs, 20 steals, and a .929 OPS at AAA. Really good walk rate, 13%. Also strikes out quite a bit. Chris, any interest in Zack Gelof as a, let's say, middle infielder in roto leagues?
Yeah, if Soderstrom doesn't have catcher eligibility, I might be more interested in Gelof. The statistical profile is pretty similar. Soderstrom probably has more power. Certainly the underlying numbers suggest that. However, the production at AAA actually tilts towards Gelof, and he brings speed to the table. And so if you're not worried about specifically having a catcher, I think I'm more interested in Gelof, but honestly, I'm not particularly interested in either, given the lineup, given the park. I think both are likely to be pretty draining on your batting average. If either hits 250 the rest of the way, I think you probably consider it a success. So I don't love either of these guys, but I actually think Gelof, because of the speed, 21 stolen bases in 81 games at AAA, I'll give him a little bit of an edge.
Let's say you play in a deeper roto league with a middle infield spot. Would you take Gelof ahead of other, I guess, top-ish prospects, Edouard Julien and Nick Gonzalez?
Ooh, well, he's probably on similar footing to Gonzalez, who I don't have a lot of faith in either.
Yeah, and Julien, I don't think they're going to play him like we want them to moving forward. Like when everyone's healthy, I'm worried about that.
So you might dump Julien. I don't know. I guess I'm a Julien stan because I've been thrilled with what he's done so far for the Twins. I know he hasn't been in the lineup every day. He's sat against left-handers, but for a middle infield option, I think that's considering he bats leadoff usually when he's in the lineup, he's providing good power.
It might.
I would be surprised if Gelof did more than that.
It might be a format thing, right? Like Julien he's got 19 runs and 13 RBI in 43 games. Now, he hasn't started all of those games, and he gets pulled from a lot of those games, but that's also kind of the issue, is that he's not playing every day. When he does play, they tend to pull him. His defense has been really bad so far. I like Edouard Julien. I wish they would just throw him out there and let him play like a normal role.
Well,
but
it seems like Rocco Baldelli likes him too, considering whenever he's up, he bats leadoff against right-handed pitchers. And so I'm kind of the belief the better he does, the more they're going to play him. And like he's, the first hurdle for an upcoming prospect is you got to perform. And Julien has at least done that. Yeah. Julian's cleared that hurdle, I feel like.
Yeah, I like Julien a lot coming into the year, but the numbers against lefties in the minors are really bad too. He's got an over 30% strikeout rate. He's still young. Obviously, he can improve, but I'm a little bit worried about his playing time. I'd still take him over Zack Gelof. Chris, was that a yes? You would take Gelof over both of those guys?
I think in Roto, I would.
Okay, let's take our final break, and when we return, we'll finish out the second round of our rest of season draft. We'll do that here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
In 3, 2, 1.
How you doing?
Run, Forrest!
Run, Ernie.
So fetch.
Yay!
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Welcome back, and we have about 20 minutes left to make 12 picks. So you guys are on the clock. Chris, you're up first with the first pick of round 2. And you are muted, sir.
There's 2 guys I want to take. I'm going to trust Scott to go by his previous one.
Chris, do it.
I'm going to take Julio Rodriguez.
No, that was the wrong answer.
I don't know what the brand option would be, but we'll see if he comes back to me, the other guy I'm talking about, at 15 overall. But I'll stick with Julio Rodriguez, who has had a disappointing season and is also on a 25 homer, 40 stolen base pace, because it seems like everyone's on a 25 homer, 40 stolen base pace, or at least the 40 stolen bases early on. So he's very good. The underlying numbers suggest that he's been a little bit unlucky. They also suggested he was a little lucky last season. So the underlying numbers are actually very similar to last season. There's another guy I want to take whose underlying numbers are much better than they were last season. So we'll see if I get to take him. If not, we'll talk about him at some point anyway. But yeah, Julio Rodriguez, elite talent. Bet on youth, bet on him improving from what he's been, both just because the underlying numbers suggest he will, and also because bet on the 22-year-old incredible athlete who had a superstar rookie season. Bet on him figuring it out after a somewhat rocky start to his second season.
Julio Rodriguez, currently the 21st overall player in Roto. It's really, everything looks pretty good except for the batting average. He's batting 249. He's actually hitting the ball harder this year than he did last year. Just got to hit it in the air a little bit more. And I think that will lead to some more power here in the second half for Julio Rodriguez. All right, Scott, you are up with the second pick of round 2.
So here we are in round 2. There are 2 players. Well, I guess there are actually 3 players remaining from my own personal first round when I did the written version of this a couple years ago. I'm not interested in the pitcher, though.
You mean a couple of weeks ago, Scott?
Yeah.
You said a couple of years ago.
A couple of weeks ago is what I meant. It feels like
it was a very, very accurate rankings from 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's between a shortstop and an outfielder. I'm going with the outfielder, it being the scarcer position, and I'm going with Juan Soto, who, since May 1st, is slashing 295, 441, 524. Very reminiscent of the Juan Soto we knew with the Nationals, the Juan Soto we knew prior to last year. He was awful in April, and I think that stands out in everybody's mind. But since then, he's been great. I think the power production is still a little less than even since May 1st. It's still a little less than I want it to be. But that's kind of always been true for Juan Soto, right? Like, what's his career high in home runs?
Has he hit 30? I don't think he's hit 30. I think it's 29. He had 34 in his second season.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought he broke 30 once. Now, I mean, during the 2020 season, he hit 13 in 47 games, so maybe that would have been another 30 homer season. But the thing is, like, with him, you're expecting high batting average, lots of runs, good power. Provides a little bit of speed. He has 6 stolen bases. I think he's fine here. I think he's good here. I think he's going to be better from today forward than he's been so far.
Yes, absolutely. And better in points. I think you probably bump him up 4 or 5 spots in a points league. And
that was the pick, Chris. That was the brand.
That was the other one. But just like, I gotta say, like, I don't know if it's that people feel like he was overhyped or what, but like, the reaction that people have to Juan Soto, like in the comments and on Twitter, it's just like, it's so far afield from what the player he actually is. And maybe that's our fault. Maybe we kept saying the best young hitter since Ted Williams, which is objectively true, but fine. If you want to be mad about it, whatever. But like, I feel like y'all listeners really underrate how good this guy is. Like, he had a miserable April, but since then it's like 100 runs, 100 RBI, 30 homers, 300 batting average, 10 plus steals. Like, he is an awesome, awesome player, and underrate him at your own risk.
I think if everything clicks for Juan Soto, he should be Freddie Freeman in the outfield, right? That's what we're expecting. Yeah. 300 batting average, solid power, 10 plus steals, good counting stats. The problem, and it's, not entirely his fault though, he's part of the problem, is the Padres lineup has let us down this year.
Yeah.
Machado was hurt. He got off to a terrible start. Bogarts has been playing hurt all year. They missed Tatis for the first month of the season. It hasn't all clicked together. But if at some point that happens in the second half, we could just see massive counting stats from that entire team. So,
and I do think it's worth pointing out, it's not even really a hypothetical. He could be Freddie Freeman of the outfield if everything breaks right. He already was Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, he has been that prior to several times. Yes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we haven't seen it, I guess, for the past 2 years. So it's we're
year and a half,
talking about the 2021 season at that point. So it has been a little bit since we've seen it, but that's what Juan Soto should be. Hopefully, moving forward.
He's Joey Votto. Like all the conversations that we're having about Juan Soto being underrated and people getting mad at him and all that, like it's just Joey Votto 10 years ago.
That's fair. The third pick of round 2, I think I'm going to take the other name here that you were referring to, Chris, and might surprise some people, but I am going to go ahead and take Bobby Witt Jr., who is quietly on pace for a near 25-50 season right now. He is hitting 257 with 14 homers and 27 steals, and the expected numbers are much better. 290 XBA, a 515 X slug. He's already the 11th overall player in Roto, 21st best hitter in head-to-head points leagues this year. There is a chance that Bobby Witt Jr. explodes in the second half. If he could come anywhere close to those expected numbers, I don't know if it's going to happen because the ballpark is kind of prohibitive there.
It does seem like Royals players consistently underperform their expected numbers.
In his case, he was right on his expected numbers last year. Like he didn't disappoint. He didn't underperform that in that regard last season. So, you know,
he's such a weird player, Bobby Witt, because like it feels like such a 1980s stat line where like this guy, you know, like the standout players of the 1980s. Oh, look, he's hitting all these home runs. He's stealing all these bases. His on-base percentage is horrible.
Yeah.
Like his real life value is far less than his fantasy value, Bobby Witt's. But, you know, stolen bases are worth what they're worth. And he's delivering a ton. Even in points leagues, his production is high because he's just giving so many stolen bases.
And if he hits to that 290 XBA, all of a sudden the on-base percentage is going to look okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's the biggest thing for me is just if I didn't think he had taken a step forward, I'd be fine letting him go until the end of the second round. But with the underlying metrics being what they are, you know, the average exit velocity's jumped up almost a full mile per hour. The barrel rate is up a couple ticks. Like it's all mostly seeming to come together for Bobby Witt in a way that I think, there's going to be a huge second half. He was one of my breakouts in the FBT newsletter today. And I think he's going to have a big second half.
All right, let's keep it moving. We've got about a minute per player left here. Chris, your backup, the fourth pick of round 2.
Oh, I don't want to make a pick now because Bobby Witt was clearly the best player available there for me.
Really?
And I'm annoyed now because I think I'm going to go Bo Bichette.
How the mighty have fallen.
But it feels boring. Is there someone
you're getting Bo Bichette this late and you're upset about?
Is there? Well, the biggest thing is that he's actually taken a really nice step forward as a hitter. He's been a better hitter than he's ever been before. It's just, where are the steals? Only 3 stolen bases. His sprint speed is down to 44%. And like, I don't think Bo Bichette is ever going to be the 950 OPS guy. I think he's more like a Kyle Tucker type, where it's like, he's a good hitter. He's not an elite hitter. And when you're stealing,
if you're just talking about leaving out all those OPS leagues, which hardly exist.
Sure,
if you're just talking about batting average, Bo Bichette is clearly a standout.
Yes, he's very, very good. Yeah, I'm underselling him a little bit, and that's probably also true with Kyle Tucker. They stand out more in fantasy as hitters. They're not like Bobby Witt. They're not better in fantasy than they are in real life. They're exactly as good in real life as they are in fantasy. It's just the shape of it is more conducive to fantasy production.
With Bo Bichette, too, similar problem to Juan Soto is the counting stats this year. He's on pace for 82 runs and 93 RBI. It's not entirely his fault because the Blue Jays have kind of underperformed. Vlad, Dalton Varsho, those guys haven't really come through. So as a result, it's keeping the counting stats down for Bo Bichette so far this season. Scott, you are up with the 5th pick of round 2.
Well, I was hoping to take Bo Bichette. So I think the drop off at hitter here is pretty big. I didn't want to take a pitcher because I don't believe in taking pitchers early, but I do think it'll be malpractice if we don't have Garrett Cole going in our first 2 rounds. So I'll just go ahead and take him. I do think he is not as dominant as he used to be. Otherwise, he would have been a slam dunk first rounder, but he is still a workhorse who gets, strikes out hitters at a nice rate that the total is going to be impressive. Not on Spencer Strider's level, but on basically anyone else's level.
I did have this as a discussion point, but we got to keep it moving here. We'll save it for another day. I think there is a case that Kevin Gausman should be drafted ahead of Garrett Cole moving forward, at least based on the strikeout numbers, and even the service level numbers are a little bit better than Garrett Cole as well. But we'll save that for another day. The 6th pick of round 2. Oh, that means I am up, huh? So I've got to figure this out very quickly. I'll go with another shortstop. I think this is fine. I know we spoke about him yesterday. He's kind of fallen off a little bit over the past couple months, but just the shape of what everything Wander Franco has done this season, I think he's certainly worthy of this pick, batting .278 with 11 home runs and 28 steals. Surprisingly, the counting stats are a little bit lacking for Wander Franco. Want to see that batting average pick up a little bit here in the second half. Will he continue to run as much as he did in the first half? I think that's a legitimate question mark, but this was a huge talent, and so far this season, he has kind of lived up to that, and I'm taking him here with the 6th pick of round 2. Chris, you are back up, 7th pick of the second round.
Yeah, the concern I have with Wander Franco is just if the steals slow down, and he had the one huge month, 14 stolen bases, I don't know how he fits in this range, but I'm not too worried about that. Oh, now it's like, which surefire first rounder from before the season who's been really disappointing do I want to take? Do I want to take one of the power hitters who's been disappointing? Do I want to take... I'll rip the bandage off. I'll go with Trey Turner, who has been miserable this season. There's really no defense of it. He has no longer been a stolen bases standout. He's on like a 35 steal pace. He hasn't been a standout really in anything so far, but it's Trey Turner. I think he's going to figure it out. He is 30 and maybe he's just lost it, but like he was really, really good last season. He drove in 100 runs. He scored 100 runs. Obviously, Philly's lineup not quite as good as the Dodgers lineup, but it's not a bad one. At the very least, I feel pretty confident that Trey Turner's going to hit like 290 the rest of the way.
So I don't have Turner in my top 2 rounds anymore.
I think that's totally real. I cannot make an affirmative case for it. I can't make a look at all these things that Trey Turner's doing. It's just look at the name.
Yeah, and I was with you for like the first couple months, but I think what the turning point for me was that like such a big part of his value in the past was that he was a stolen base standout.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he gets back to running like he did in the past, he won't be a clear stolen base standout anymore. There are a lot of other players, Wander Franco included, who are even more of a stolen base standout than Trey Turner was. Like he hasn't kept up with the times as a base stealer. And then on top of that, you need his batting average to bounce back in an enormous way. And I just don't see all that happening. So I'm happy to leave him out. I was hoping you'd reduce some of the clutter here at first base because there are 4 first basemen who need to go before the second round is done, I think. And I'd rather not be forced to pick the first of them, but I will go ahead and take Vladimir Guerrero here, who has been the least productive. The least productive of the 4, has the best underlying stats, has the best single season in the recent past of any of them. And so, we're kind of doing this all last year too, waiting for Vladimir Guerrero to bounce back to that 2021 production. I think at the very least, he's going to bounce back to his 2022 production. And that'll be worth a late second round pick.
There's a big difference, I think, between last year and this year. And it's that last year he played to his expected stats. This year, he's massively underperforming. He's been one of the biggest underperformers in baseball. His expected WOBA is 395. His actual WOBA is 342. So, like, I get it. Oh, he only hit well in the minor league park and all that. Like,
actually, his expected stats look a lot like that 2021 season. 306 XBA, 545 X slug.
Yeah. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr. goes with the 8th pick of round 2. Oh, that means that I'm on the clock. So I should probably figure out who am I going to take. And I'm looking up and down here. There's a name that has performed. He was really good in the first couple of months. Do I want to do it? He's kind of fallen off. It's kind of a boring pick. I'm going to go ahead with a first baseman, and maybe it surprises people here, but I'm going to take Matt Olson, who is the 7th overall player in Roto right now. 29 home runs, the 2nd most in baseball. Crazy counting stats with the Atlanta Braves. And it feels like every couple of years we kind of swap the production from him and Pete Alonso, and he's doing something similar to what we saw Pete Alonso do. We know it's going to be a lower batting average, right? It's 240, 250, but we're looking at a near 50 home run season with 250 combined runs and RBI. That's a really, really valuable player there with Matt Olson. So I'm going to go ahead and make him the 9th pick of round 2. And Chris, you are back up.
Yeah. This is my last pick.
That it is. You got to make it count.
Are you guys going to do it?
I'm not going to.
Someone's got to do it.
I don't think we have to.
I don't know what it is. Oh, I know what it is. I'm not going to do it. No.
I don't want to be the one to do it.
If you want it to happen,
get mad if we don't
like you
do
have to
it.
be the one. No, don't worry about what the people think. You never have to look them in the eye.
I haven't brought myself to the point where I have Elly De La Cruz ranked inside of my top 24, so I'm not going to do it. So I will take.
He has performed like a top 24 player on
Yes,
a per game
absolutely.
basis so far. It's worth pointing out.
He's been outstanding, even in points leagues. He's been really awesome. That'll happen when you're on an 80 steal pace. I will go with the other. He's not a first baseman, but the other early round pick who has been disappointing, but the underlying numbers are very, very good. And that's Rafael Devers, who actually has the second highest expected WOBA of his career, has the second highest hard hit rate, second lowest strikeout rate, third lowest strikeout rate. Sorry, excuse me, fake news. Rafael Devers, it's been disappointing, and yet he's on a 130 RBI, 37 home run pace. And it's really just the batting average hasn't been there. The batting average will be there. He's going to hit 280 the rest of the way, and Rafael Devers is going to be an obvious second-round pick next year.
All right, Scott, you are up. Your last pick in this draft and the 11th pick of round 2.
So I think we both need to take first baseman. Maybe you'll disagree, Frank, but I will take Pete Alonso, who I would actually take ahead of Matt Olson. It's worth pointing out. I do think Olson deserves to go in round 2, but the reasons I prefer Alonso over Olson still, a much lower strikeout rate, and kind of like I was saying for Shohei Ohtani, I feel like we're assessing Olson now right after he's been the hottest he's been all year. He had a huge June like Ohtani, and so his pace numbers look better than I think he can live up to. And meanwhile, Alonso is kind of the opposite end of the coin. He's coming off one of his coldest stretches of the season, so his pace numbers would look worse than they're probably going to end up being. I think the one potential equalizer is that the Braves lineup is so much better than the Mets lineup.
Well,
so
I think there's another one.
Finishes ahead. What is it?
He came back really, really quickly from that wrist injury. Like that was they talked about that as like a 3-4 week thing, and he was back at the minimum, right? He was back in 10 days, and so that also coincides with him being pretty bad. I don't know if it correlates to it, but it certainly happened around the same time, and one does wonder. But I think he'll be fine. I think he's right. Him and Matt Olson, it's very much Spider-Man meme, but Alonso's been much more predictable over the course of their careers.
Yeah, I think specifically for this exercise, drafting for the rest of the season, I am a little bit worried about this wrist injury. Since he's returned, batting 147 with a 611 OPS, I'll be happy to be wrong. Hopefully, Pete Alonso, these last couple days off.
But lost the home run derby. Big red flag. First time in his life. I don't know if that's true.
I think he lost the home run derby last year,
right? He didn't win it. I don't know if he participated.
I think he lost last year. Didn't he lose to Julio? No, he lost to Julio this year.
He lost to Julio. I don't know.
He may have lost to him both years.
Maybe.
I can't remember.
I can't remember either. Anyway, hopefully Pete Alonso is healthy coming out of the break.
He did lose to Julio Rodriguez last year, yes.
The wrist injury has been a little bit of a problem there for him. The last pick of round 2, I think that there are two pretty obvious names. Oh, people are going to be so upset we didn't draft Elly De La Cruz. I'll go with Paul Goldschmidt. I'll take kind of boring old veteran player here. The Cardinals, by the way, it sounds like they're going to be selling pieces off here ahead of the trade deadline. Goldschmidt, the 34th overall player in Roto, hitting 284 with 15 home runs and 8 steals. And not to the same extent, but kind of like the Padres, their whole lineup hasn't clicked together at the same time. So if at any point Lars Nootbaar gets going and Tommy Edman is healthy,
they're going to trade half of them away before
that is true. Jordan Walker, Nolan Arenado, Goldschmidt, if they all get going at the same time, I think, this lineup could see some better days here in the second half. But Paul Goldschmidt, as safe as they come, really, really high floor play.
I want to say between those 4 first basemen in round 2, Guerrero, Olsen, Alonso, Goldschmidt is the order we drafted them in. I have no clue what order those 4 are going to finish in. I keep rearranging them in my rest of season rankings, just hoping I can find an order that feels right, and it never feels quite right.
Just to point out a few names who didn't make the cut, obviously Elly De La Cruz. And I'll say this, if he continues to do this for the rest of the season, then I think he's probably going to push and be a first-round pick next year. But it's such a small sample. It's only been 30 games.
If we do this in a month, and maybe we just need to revisit this in a month, it's either going to be Elly De La Cruz as a first-round pick, or he's not in this discussion. I feel like that's one. He's either going to keep doing what he's doing, and it's going to be like, oh, you idiots, what were you thinking? Mm-hmm. Of course he's a first-rounder. Or it's going to be like the strikeout rate spikes. He can't hit lefties. He keeps hitting 60% of his hits as ground balls. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a little scary.
And by the way, if I'm putting money down, I'm putting it on him continuing to do what he's doing. I just afforded the opportunity of hedging here because there are a lot of other good players. So that's what I'm choosing to do for this exercise.
Yeah. But again, if he keeps this up, I think we're talking about him as a first-round pick heading into next year. That's Elly De La Cruz. A few other names that I have written down here who I think just missed the cut. Shane McClanahan, kind of seeing how healthy he is in the second half. Sounds like he should start this weekend, hopefully. He's dealing with some back stiffness. Marcus Semien, he's still 20th overall in Roto. The counting stats are amazing. He's on pace for 19 home runs and 16 steals. That was surprising to me. That doesn't really sound like a second-round player to me. Kevin Gausman has been really good. Zach Gallen, I think, is in this conversation. And then Manny Machado is red hot. Francisco Lindor is hitting well over the past month. But
you know a name that we haven't mentioned?
Who's that?
Ozzy Albies.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's the number 17 player so far. There are a couple players ranked in this range who like Josh Young is the number 18 player in Roto. He's not a second-round pick. I think even if he finishes as a top 10, 20 player, we're not going to draft him that way. But Ozzy Albies is the one that stands out. Like Lane Thomas is a top 20 player. Nobody's going to pick him there. But I think you can make a case for Randy Arozarena.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Luis Robert.
I wouldn't put it past Austin Riley to have a top 20.
Sure. Yeah.
Adolis Garcia too.
Adolis Garcia is a top 6 player in Roto. We didn't mention him at all. And I think that's the end of the list. Francisco Lindor's been a top 15 player, which is kind of remarkable.
We basically just drafted the first 3 rounds.
Bryce Harper.
So, there you go. Chris, you kind of muted yourself mid-sentence there.
Bryce Harper's in that discussion. Absolutely, yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap there. Who do we miss? Let us know in the YouTube comments or tweet at us and yell at us and let us know. Who did we miss today in the redraft for the rest of the season? For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.